And it's been a long time since I've really even had the courage to touch this social space again with my images and portrayal of the Savior. Now, this podcast is not going to include fancy, beautiful images. It's not going to include cinematic footage that you might expect from a creative like myself. It's down to earth, real life stories from the scriptures, from my life, about God and grace. Today we're talking about Peter, but specifically the moment when he denied Jesus Christ. And if you'll remember, it was in the garden where Peter drew the sword right after Jesus had bled from every pore. And he was covered in blood. His face was almost disoriented, and the Roman soldiers didn't know who he was. This was right at the moment when Judas betrayed Jesus with a kiss, and Peter drew his sword and smote off one of the ears from the soldiers. We're talking about that Peter, that courageous Peter who loved Jesus so much. Now, he does get a bad rap because he denied the Savior. And certainly there was a lot going through his mind that we just don't understand and will probably never understand. But the thing that we can all relate to is that Jesus was still merciful with him despite the things that he did wrong. Now, as the Roman soldiers took Jesus, Peter followed him. From the research I've done and the research that others have done, Peter and John were the only ones that followed Jesus, while the other disciples forsook him, meaning that they left. They did not follow as the Roman soldiers took Jesus. Now, what does that mean for Peter and John? Well, they witnessed something that no one else did. They witnessed Jesus being interrogated. They witnessed all of those moments leading up to his death. And that's partly one of the reasons why we even know that this happened, is because Peter witnessed it firsthand. He saw it. He felt it. And Jesus looked at him and said, "You are going to deny me when the cock crows on the third time." According to Jewish law, roosters were not allowed in the city. So what does that mean, and why does that detail matter? Well, it matters because we know that the Romans had a watch system. So every 3 hours, there was a change of guard. Now, at 3 a.m, this is when the cock crowed, the trumpet sounded. And on that third time, that is when Peter denied knowing Jesus. Now, why does that matter? It matters because there is a pattern in the scriptures that talk about the fourth watch. And this just happens to be on that fourth watch, starting at 3 to 6 a.m. If you remember, when the disciples were going across the Sea of Galilee, there was a storm that came, and Jesus went to them on the fourth watch between 3 and 6 a.m. It's that same watch, that same hour, at 3, at 6 a.m. I don't know about you, but at 3 a.m, when my kids wake up, I can barely even comprehend what's going on. 3 to 6 a.m, for whatever reason, is a really hard time for a lot of people. And it certainly was for Peter. He was sitting next to a bed of coals where Peter denied knowing Jesus. He was warming himself up because it was cold. It was in the middle of the night. But it was also by a bed of coals that Jesus found Peter. Earlier this week, I had an experience that taught me about this very thing, about God's grace in meeting me where I was. It was late one night and my wife had already fallen asleep. And I had been struggling with some challenges in my life. And I was at a fork in the road where I needed to make some changes to be better, so to speak. And after I said my nightly prayers, I lay in bed, but I couldn't fall asleep. I was restless. And so I did what I normally do, and I got back on my knees and I started praying again. But this prayer was different because I didn't really say anything. And I just let God talk to me. And he showed me things in my life, patterns in my life, where I had continually done the same thing over and over again. And he showed me the things that I needed to change. He didn't say anything. He just showed me. He said, Tyler, this is where you are, and this is what you've done. And he left it open-ended. He didn't rebuke me. He didn't chastise me. He didn't yell. He just showed me where I had failed. And he said, now you know what you need to do to change. And I believe that Christ did the same thing or something similar with Peter. Peter knew that he had failed his best friend in the moment when he needed it most. And Christ didn't need to remind him of that. He already knew it. But I do believe that Christ showed him and met him at his weakest point so that Peter could see, this is how I can improve. This is how I can be better. Because Christ did the same thing for me. He showed me with love and grace. Now, if there are things in your life where you feel like you are at that fork in the road, when you are at that breaking point, God will meet you at your weakest point with grace and mercy. Thank you for sticking around, and thank you for being on the podcast today. Wherever you are, wherever you may be, if you stick around and are here next time, I'll be here with you, going through the same struggles and trying to do better each and every day, just like you are. Because Peter's story doesn't end at his weakest point. It doesn't end with denying Christ. It ends with being redeemed. And so does your story, and so can all of our stories. Our failures are not a defining moment, but they are a moment. And they're a moment that we can learn from and become better because of it. So we'll see you next time for part 2.